Hey, welcome to Creator Toolbox. It feels like I haven't heard that music in forever. It is so great to be here with you today. This is the show that brings you, our ServiceNow developers and admins, all the tools you need to be effective on the ServiceNow platform. And joining me today, we'll do a quick introduction. For those that don't know me, I shouldn't always assume that. There are people that are watching. This is their very first ServiceNow video, and thank you very much. My name is Chuck Tomasi. I'm a senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. I've been with the company since 2010. I was a customer for a couple of years prior to that, and have a developer experience that now extends past 40 years. I have a hard time coming to that realization. It means I'm getting old. Also joining me today is this man over here, Sascha. Give yourself an intro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sascha Wildgrube. I'm technical consultant with ServiceNow, now for the best part of 3 years. So I joined ServiceNow pretty close to the beginning of the pandemic. You guys still remember back that time? Yeah, it's the place we started, working from home and all these things. Didn't have much exposure to ServiceNow other than through the application process, and since then really grew in love with that wonderful platform, especially around all these topics around pro coding, automated testing, automated code checks, CI/CD pipeline automation. So these are the topics that really keep me up and running and enthusiastic. So thanks for having me.
Right. Thank you very much, Sascha. We have one more person joining us. He just jumped out, though. I was going to introduce with great fanfare, waiting for him to come right back. He's typing to me on Teams at the moment, so we're getting real-time updates as we speak. This is a bit of a unique start for us. It just froze. He's having some technical issues, so we'll bring him in. In the meantime, Sascha, why don't you give us an introduction of what we'll be talking about here? The title was something about coding standards, guidelines, and instant scan.
Oh, yeah. Sounds pretty boring, doesn't it? Now, a coding guideline, most people who ever worked in an organization, in a larger team, everyone feels like, bad about everyone doing its own stuff and doing things a little bit different, and there's no consistency in the code, and everything is difficult to find and difficult to change. And then some, smart people come around and say, hey, here's a coding guideline. You guys all have to apply, what's written in here. Yeah. And if not, it's going to have some kind of consequences. Well, the fact is, most of the times this coding guideline sits in some kind of a wiki or Confluence or whatever, and it sits there well, unchanged for ages, and no one really looks at it, right? This is usually what we think about a coding guideline. Now, something very important happened, right, Chuck? I mean, we waited for that so desperately long, and finally we have it. Now in Tokyo release, we finally have modern JavaScript finally introduced into the platform. And that's great. We've all been waiting for that. But what does that mean, actually? It means that we have a number of new options, a number of new tools. And I guess developer teams will adopt it very quickly. Yeah, once it's available, once it's in your development environment, and you heard something about, they updated production already, so you're going to start using it. So that means we will have more variety on how things can be put in code, right? So we have more different flavors, more different tastes, more people making things even more different. Not arguing about whether that's good or bad, but the variety of things that you will see will increase. So if any organization, if you have ever thought about, when is the best point in time to introduce a coding guideline that people really will respect, I guess now is the best time to do that. So this gave the headline for the show today. Is how can we make use of platform capabilities to build a coding guideline and actually to enforce it, right? I mean, taking that coding guideline out of this fairy tale, sleepy castle, yeah, in the confluence where it sits, into reality, right? So this is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This is a great time to reconsider those coding standard guidelines because, as you mentioned, there's more options. With Tokyo, we've introduced ES6 Plus. You get more of the ECMAScript capabilities from 6, 7, 12, 2021, pick your version. And we will continue to extend that as we go forward with new releases. But like you said, that means some people are going to choose, like me, the option the way they've been doing it for the last 7 years. And other people will say, well, no, we should really use this newer, cleaner, modern way of doing this. Say, you've got to decide which way you do. And you're here to show us how we can enforce that?
Yes, absolutely.
Don't we already have like a quick start or something in Instant Scan that we can use?
Well, let me put it this way. The platform has Instant Scan.
Yeah.
An Instant Scan can be used to build out your own checks. For those who are familiar with the health scan, I would say Instant Scan is the little brother of health scan.
Let's give them a definition of what is Instant Scan for the people that are just watching for the first time.
All right. Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, screen share coming up.
Yeah.
Where'd my magic button go to do that? Here we go.
Okay, so quick tour through Instant Scan. So what is it actually? Instant Scan.
Wait, I got to stop you. I think everybody needs to take a drink because I'm going to ask you to make your font size larger.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Much better.
Yep. All right.
So, Instant Scan.
Instant Scan has something that is called a check. And as you can see, there's quite a number of checks already in here. Some of them have been created by myself in this instance, and others are shipped with the instance itself. Now, well, this doesn't really, give us a good idea on what's really there. So there's something like comparable to the automated test framework, where tests are organized in suites.
Okay.
We have the same thing in Instant Scan as well. So checks are organized in suites. Yeah, like files are organized in folders.
Sure.
And currently, Instant Scan comes with the one and only Instant Security Center definitions scan suite with a number of checks that all circle around the security configuration of your instance. And there's a nice dashboard, a workspace that shows you the results of these checks and helps you to configure the security configuration of your platform better. Now, the interesting thing for me was we can also use Instant Scan to look into our code. Well, essentially, we can use Instant Scan to look into basically everything in the platform. If it's a record, we can scan it. So what I thought what we could do is we could take all that knowledge from the community, my own ideas, things that I see going wrong at clients I'm working for, and put that into a scan suite that explicitly looks at code quality. And this is where the CodeSanity suite is coming from. So in a nutshell, Instant Scan is a platform capability. It comes with a number of checks, but they are security configuration related. So anything else you want to look at, like code or maybe even data consistency, all sorts of things, you have to create your own checks in order to get there. So that's essentially what I did. So I'm interested in code quality. So I created a suite with a number of checks that look into code quality. I put all these checks and the suite and a number of functionalities around it into a scoped app. I called it CodeSanity. It's out in the public. It's on the GitHub repo, and maybe we can share the link pretty soon. And that's basically my starting point.
Okay. Now I have to imagine that this is your starting point, but if I'm working at my organization, we may have different rules. Some of these are religious, if philosophical. That well, Sascha said this, but what we've got a strong stance that he says don't do this, but we're really going to do that. Is there like just an active button we can deactivate on the Sascha rules we don't like, or create new ones that we do like? How do we extend what you've given us? Great starting point, by the way.
Well,
I don't want to
let your ask. And let's take a look at one of these new, arguably religious CodeSanity checks that I introduced. I personally, for example, let's put a specific example here. I don't like the spread operator. It's one of these new modern JavaScript features. And whenever I see code that is using the spread operator, I feel like, okay, it really gives me a hard time to understand this. And when I ask around, people also have difficulties to understand that.
Right.
So my conclusion, my personal conclusion really was using the spread operator, no matter whether it's used to decompose arrays or to express that there's multiple parameters in a function, there's even two flavors in it, it does not really help me to understand the code better, right? Again, this is my personal impression, that's my personal opinion. I think a coding guideline should start with avoid the spread operator, right? Again, personal opinion. Now, the most straightforward thing you could do if you say, well, let's use that as a starting point, install the app, and run the CodeSanity suite against our apps. But we totally disagree about the idea of not using the spread operator. We love the spread operator.
It may be part of your base training. Who knows? It shouldn't be illegal just because Sascha says so.
No, by far.
In your world, this is a bad thing because it's difficult to understand. It would be like somebody trying to, I'll say it 1,000 times, but if you have an option of writing a coded version of something and a non-coded version, a low-code, no-code version of that same solution, take the low-code, no-code one, because code always implies there's going to be technical debt. If you do have to script, and we do sometimes, make sure it's maintainable, it's readable. This may be one of those situations that it's confusing to people who don't have that depth of experience. So you may want to turn this on and go, hey, this is important to us that you don't make it more confusing than it has to be. If you wanted confusing code, you'd be writing Perl. I'm sorry, I had to take that jab.
But yeah, it's pointing out exactly the right thing. It's all about experience. And even, well, I mean, Chuck, you probably can claim that stance. For me, I'm not sure. Some of us will consider themselves as experienced developers, right?
Right.
Others might not. And in every team, in every organization, there's, the hard-boiled, seen it all, roughneck kind of super coders who've seen it all, and
I have friends like that, long gray ponytail, long gray beard. They look like Gandalf.
Yeah, exactly. These guys, they don't have any issues with the spread operator, right? They read it, they immediately understand everything, they spit every bug on the spot. Yeah, no worries. But what about the less experienced ones, right? We want to, get a new generation of coders on board. Well, let's admit that sometimes it's the younger coders who have even more experience and are better in writing JavaScript code than we are, right? And maybe it's just me getting old, right? It's I'm not used to the spread operator. That's new to me. I don't really want to learn something new. So it might be opinionated. Long story short, yes, you can deactivate it.
Okay.
Right? It's as simple as that. The truth is, it's not as simple as that. There's even a more sophisticated mechanism built into CodeSanity that allows you to define blacklists and whitelists for specific applications. This is something that you may stumble into if you're applying it to a huge organization with an existing huge complex code base, where you have to consider certain legacy that is not compliant with the coding guideline and will never be. But you still want to see a clean slate on your findings, right? Then you can do that.
And I look at that like somebody who built a house, say 150 years ago. They were lucky to have electricity, if at all. But as building codes have changed, much like our coding standards, you're looking for new things. But you can't always go to a house built 150 years ago and say, excuse me, you don't have a ground wire on your wiring. You can't live in this house anymore. That's the way the house was built. That's the way all the appliances work. As they make improvements, they can go back and say, we're renovating this bathroom. Let's fix the wiring. Let's take the lead pipes out of the bathroom. All the stuff that makes that older house unsafe and difficult to maintain, they can fix along the way. So it's sort of a maintain as you go, but this will allow you to enforce the newest standards on the newest work.
Exactly. And as I said, some of these checks, well, probably the majority, is highly opinionated. Well, there are some of which we probably can agree quite quickly. But again, that's assumption. We should not have debug output in our code. We shouldn't have sysids in our scripts. Okay, check on that. But here again, throwing exceptions. That's a whole argument on its own. Yeah, should we use exception handling or not in our own code? Bad enough that we have to catch exceptions from someone else, but should we throw them in our code? And you can imagine how religious this debate can be. But this thing I built it for two purposes. The one thing is really to have a baseline on creating a coding guideline, and that it's not just a document that actually can be used to look into code and give you the deviations. That's one thing. The second thing is I wanted to wake up a developer community at a client and really get them, being part of the conversation. And for them, even these highly opinionated, highly questionable checks, it's a gold mine. You really get the people engaged and involved, right? They love, for example, there's this one guy who loves exception handling. He thinks that every error in every context should be thrown as an exception. He was engaged. You can guess that, right? So it's very easy, to bring people to the table if you make some bold statements.
Yeah, let's get consensus on that. And like you said, this is a living, breathing set of records. It's not a static document that lives somewhere, because like you said, technology changes, practices changes, the experience level of your teams change. You will need to come back and revisit this and say, hey, do we still need this standard? This implies there's got to be some sort of review process in place that you want to visit annually, quarterly. That's up to you, but someone should be in charge of these coding standards to take a look at these and maintain them over time. Because like I said, there's change will happen. And you may say, you know what, today's the day we're going to adopt that spread operator because we've been trained on it. Everybody loves it. We think it's the right way to go. If we don't see it, we can, maybe we can flag that too, but it's no longer an evil thing, so we'll disable it. That's the discussion you want to have. So use this set as a starting point and then come up with your own. You may have 15, 20, 150 more that you'd like to add to this, and it allows you to keep that up to date far, far better than this document that you assume everybody's supposed to read and memorize.
Exactly. And while talking about a document, why not having it as a document?
Wait a minute. What kind of voodoo are you doing here? Did you write this, or is this generated from those records?
It's actually, well, no, I handwritten every single word. Well, in fact, I did. But what we see here is a UI page that takes the contents from all these checks that are part of that suite and pulls it together in a document. And the fun part is you can even, just copy paste the text and paste it in your Confluence if that's what makes you happy. Yeah. But at least, someone who says, well, I can see you're not introducing all these checks and, no one knows about these checks. Is this documented somewhere? And you can say, yes.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah. Oh, all right. Okay. So this leaves you with the only burden that you have to copy paste this UI page into your Confluence page once in a while, or you even create an integration to do that. Right?
I was going to say, if there's a REST API, I'm all over that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. I mean, yeah, but you might run into issues because this is probably living in a dev environment and your Confluence is, well, it's part of the production stack. So yeah, it might be difficult once in a while, but at least it's a point to start from.
As I look at this list, I'm seeing some things that we've been pontificating, or we talked about religious things before. We've been preaching about these like no hard-coded sysids in scripts. That's been sort of a rule since time immemorial, documented since at least 2012. And to have it in here, some old familiar ones in here, but yet you've added a number of them that I didn't think of 10 years ago. So this is great. This is great to be able to keep this up to date. And again, now this is a starting point that organizations can use to create their own variants on that. I would love to see a community built around this. You said you've got a GitHub repo. Let's make a fork, do some pull requests, and get a collective of, hey, I also found this, or we made a new check for that. I think that'd be incredible.
It's public on GitHub for a reason. Yeah, it's public domain.
Should they just search for like ServiceNow CodeSanity, or what are we looking for?
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, this is. Here we go.
Gee, that was tough.
Simple.
ServiceNow CodeSanity. There it is. Okay, how many works do we have right now? Who's taking copies?
I think not that many yet. Let's see. Where can you see the forks?
I thought it was in the upper right. I see stars, no forks. It's no grayed out. Upper right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's relatively new. So
sure.
Let's see what happens after the show. All right.
Do you want to run it? I mean, how long does it take to run your suite? Would it be something we could do now?
It depends on how much is in your app.
Okay.
Now let's take a look at that in action. But first of all, we need something to check, and I brought another fun project of mine. You can guess what it is.
Ah, the good old game of life. I had to write this in Fortran one.
It's really a POC, right? I haven't made it public on my GitHub repository yet. Now, what it does, obviously, it plays the game of life, and it starts with a pattern. And the pattern is basically, one of these figures here, a combination of set or unset fields. Mm-hmm. And these patterns live in a pattern record that is derived from sys metadata, so I can make it part of an app and then ship it. But the first thing it does before it actually starts, it needs to load the pattern, right? So anyway, let's take a look at it. So I'm here in Studio and the Game of Life application, and there's an additional button which is new. Yeah, usually it's not there. So it comes with the CodeSanity app, and what it does is it scans the complete app against the CodeSanity suite. So you don't have to select it each time. Yeah. So if you use the out-of-the-box instant scan, you have the choice between, I can just show it. Yeah. So if you are in a scan suite, yeah, you have this execute suite scan button, and then you can select, for example, a scoped app.
Right.
And this would essentially do the same thing.
So you've simplified the process by enabling it within Studio. Nice.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm still working on getting a better progress dialog, which already shows you the button to navigate to the results. Still work in progress, but it does what it should.
You're way better at doing those process dialogues than I ever was. I could never get those to work.
Well, I stole this one from, I think it is committing changes in Studio.
Okay.
So I kind of, side by side compare what are they doing? How am I supposed to do it? And yeah, that's how far I got. So let's see. So let's view the results. So it leads me to another page that shows a scan result record.
Right.
As you can see, I'm using I'm using the SNUtils plugin over here, so I can see the technical names. For those of you probably have spotted that already. And the scan result record gives me an overview on the results, as the name suggests, of the scan. I do have 12 findings. What the hell? Am I not able to follow my own coding guideline or what? Well, we'll take a look at it.
We call that demo data.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, to be honest, I prepared that. So it shows me which suites it used. It shows me the checks that it applied. It might be that you have to, for example, there's a check as service portal widgets. There's no service portal widget in that app. So it wouldn't even use that check in the scan because there's no widgets to check.
Sure.
If one of the scripts within the checks would fail and run into some kind of an error, you would see it here in the failures. And here you can see the targets, which in that case is my custom application Game of Life. So out of these 27 checks, I've got 12 findings. And now I can do the work of looking at it and see if I can fix them. So I mentioned that here in my Game of Life application, the first thing that it does is that it loads the pattern. So it
somewhere in there you have a
Ajax request. It goes through certain scripting, but the main function where it ends up at is the get pattern script include.
Right.
Some kind of a pattern ID, and this is where most of these findings are. So let's take a look again. So what findings do we have? Glide record without new.
That's dangerous.
What the hell? I mean, this doesn't even look like a coding guideline thing. This is more preventing me from making a mistake. So where's this? Oh, look at that. Damn it. I forgot the new. And this is actually a tricky one. I was really asking myself, does it make sense to add this to a coding guideline? Because shall we cover every single mistake that a developer could do? Well, probably not. But this is so commonplace. If you search your code base for example, equal signs, any number of blanks, and glide records, you will be surprised what you can find, especially in cases like this. See what I'm doing here? I'm doing a request on my patterns, these neat little Game of Life creatures, and I'm using the ID and match it to the pattern. And if I find it, I return it. And if I don't find it, I give it another try and see does the pattern match the name? So it's kind of a fallback, right? If this didn't work, I try that.
Right.
Now, if my implementation is mostly using the ID and not the name, I might never see that bug to happen. And I mean, as we just saw, if I just skip the new, this is syntactically correct. Yeah, I can assign the class object that is representing the glide record into GR pattern. So you could do something like new GR pattern and assign it to another variable. So this is really dangerous. New should be here. So what else do we have? Debug output. Well, obviously I'm still working on it, so what's the deal? But yeah, I'm using my own function here, debug, but it will also respond to something like gs.debug. That will have the same effect. So of course, I don't want to have these little debug output things in my production code. So I better remove them. Here's one, and there's one. Here's another one. No, that should be all.
Or you could use a property to enable and disable that.
Yeah, that's true. And guess what? There's even a check that checks if the system property that defines the log level of an app is defined or not. And here again, you could, you could argue, no, we don't want that system property to be part of every single app. Then of course you can deactivate the check and just ignore it. But at least please have that discussion, right? Maybe it's a good idea to have this have the system property in place. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's just another way of achieving the same thing. But of course, you might also argue whether does it make sense to have all the code statements that produce the debug output in the code in the first place if you're no longer debugging anything. Yeah, if you're done debugging, you may just want to remove the debug output.
I like having the property because there may be a situation in production where something acts up that you can't reproduce, whether it's based on the data or some other situation. You can always turn that debugging on, see it for a little while, capture the log statements, and then turn it off. And
then the instance scan check can act as a reminder that at some point you should also remove them.
Yep.
So it's always, a question on how you apply it. Okay, now what else do we have? The constant array index anti-pattern. That's a nice thing. What we mean by that is this here. A constant that is used to get the value from an array. The point is, why is this problematic? Because if let's say in this case, the A pattern, let's assume that that's an array. Yeah, it comes out of parsed JSON. So it could be an array. It could also be an object. Yeah, depends on what we put into the parsed JSON function here. So we don't really know, is this really an array? And is using the syntax A pattern in brackets 0, is it safe? Because we don't even know whether it has a first element. Yeah, maybe it is an array, but maybe it's empty. And if it's empty, in that case, that statement would cause an evaluator error and stop the script on the spot. So even with modern JavaScript that we have in Tokyo, there's no such thing like a conditional referencing, where you can say only if that element exists or that member exists, address it, and otherwise return null. Yeah, we don't have that yet. So this kind of a syntax is really dangerous. So we shouldn't be doing this. In that case, we want to know if a pattern is an array in the first place. So I just remove it. But if I think that I need to do some error handling or some processing of an array, I should always use either an iterator pattern or a for loop, or anything that prevents me from putting a constant index into into that array syntax. Yeah? Because if the element doesn't exist, it would just produce an error and stop the script.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Using that check alone, and with been scanning a large client's code base for a while now, it revealed so many hidden defects that only eventually show up. Difficult to track, difficult to find, difficult to reproduce, and we could remove all these dangerous places in the code. This is really amazing. Okay, what else?
One more.
Yeah, we still have energy. The throwing exceptions. Okay, well, in that case, you could say, well, this is a bit constructed.
Yeah.
Again, to be honest, maybe it's just my age. Or, I grew up in early C, world where exception handling. I don't know whether it still exists back then or already existed back then. I don't know. But anyway, I was used to use return codes to communicate error conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So either I return what the function is supposed to return, or I return false and log an error somewhere. But I'm always thinking about the V-shaped execution flow, right? I'm digging deeper into more functions, and then the function does something. It return the code, return code, and return orderly. Yeah, I don't like dig deep into functions and then directly throw the exception until it's being captured. So again, highly opinionated. You can have a different opinion on that, and probably a lot of you out there do have a different opinion on that. I'm using this example here to show that how, let's say, how unnecessary exceptions often are. In this case, I could just return false and
Right.
it's fine. Of course, there are use cases in which you can justify using exceptions, but in that case, obviously, it doesn't make sense. So let's save this and run the check again. This is going to take a little moment. While we're looking at this, you might have wondered, how did I build this? Here's a fun fact. And if we have that 2 minutes, I'll
Sure.
lead you into the rabbit's hole. It's a React application.
Witchcraft, I say.
I let that sink in. Yes, it's a React application. Let's take a look. It's is it this one? This one. So this is the code of what we're currently seeing here. This is our pattern ID. Yeah, so it initializes itself using a particular pattern, and that is then loaded using an AJAX request. This is a shorthand for React.component. Yeah, so it's just has its own parent class, but it's using the core React feature here. Here it's referencing to another React component. This one is doing, let's say, the actual game state. It loads the pattern, and it draws the game of life board, which actually does the drawing.
Nice.
We can see it here. So obviously I'm using SVG as the render engine, and using, let's say, the usual React typical patterns to put the different HTML elements together. So that's what the Game of Life application does. So in case anyone asks, can we do React-based front ends in ServiceNow? Yes, we can.
All right,
So-
it's finished. Hopefully we have less than 12 issues again, or 12 findings.
I hope so as well. Let's see. Oh yeah, we fixed some. There's still some remaining.
Right.
8 findings. So as you can guess, now next iteration, we will look at it again, see what other findings are there, and fix them step by step. And now the big question is, I mean, we talked already about it needs to be embedded into a developer community, a group of people who have that discussion, who form an opinion about which checks should they have, which should we not, what additional checks do we need, eventually also trying to learn from big mistakes, right? See, what did we do wrong last time when this big release just, was delayed or new defects were discovered? Can we derive something from the mistakes we made? Can we create a check that prevents us from making comparable mistakes in the future? So this is always a very important question to ask. How can we build in the experience of this community into new checks? Because there will always be new team members, there will always be junior developers helping out. So mistakes will repeat themselves. Yep. If we find a way to capture them in checks, that's awesome.
Sascha, this is built on Instant Scan, so I'm assuming you wouldn't have any issues integrating this with Tokyo's App Engine Management Center, which has configurable pipelines. And one of the options for those configurable pipelines is, hey, when I'm moving from dev to test, for example, I want to trigger my ATF test, I want to trigger my instant scans. This could be part of that natural progression of your configurable pipeline in App Engine Management Center, et cetera. Or if you've written your own pipeline configuration, same APIs to trigger instant scan. It's just you're triggering your version of CodeSanity. So there's nothing magical here. We're just giving you a whole bunch of starting points to test this with.
Absolutely. While talking about APIs and pipelines, I think it's very important to know here that there's this namespace SNCI/CD.
Yeah.
It's a continuous integration, continuous development. And we do have a number of APIs here. We do have one for ADF. We have one for installations. And also we have it for instant scan execution.
Nice.
So yes, no matter what kind of tool, system, or integration mechanism you use, it's accessible via REST APIs. So there's no excuse. Yeah, you can build it into your CI/CD pipeline, no matter what. Yeah, and the next interesting question is, how do we treat these findings from an organizational point of view? And this is something that we're currently developing with one of our clients, is that we want to get to a point where there is zero findings during an automated CI/CD pipeline deployment.
Right.
And this means that the teams really need to do a lot of homework now in order to get rid of their findings, or raise their hand and say, hey, we do have a legacy code base. We totally agree on the finding themselves, but it's just too risky. It's too complicated. It's too much effort, essentially, to fix it. So yeah, we can create an exception or dump the check completely, because the balance between how much gain do we expect from that check versus the effort to be compliant is just too high. But we want to get to that point where we run these checks and we get no findings at all.
Wonderful stuff, Sascha. You've covered a lot. Didn't see a whole lot of questions in the chat for us, other than hooray. Thank you. Thank you once again. There's been a lot to look for yet. If you want to find this, I'll do my best to put a link right to his Git repo in the description of this video shortly after we finish recording this. So you should find it there if you're interested. Take a look at his CodeSanity implementation and give it a try. Test it out on your PDI. Write some code. See what the findings are. Discuss it with your team. There's your call to action for this time. So thank you again. And until next time, I look forward to... Have you thought about making any of this a session at the next CreatorCon?
Oh yeah, it's submitted. I'm still holding my thumbs.
Okay. Who knows? Maybe we'll have some hands-on for those that say, I want to test this with my own hands in person. You've got an option. You can either do it on your own on your PDI today, or if you're heading to Knowledge in May of 2023, Don't know when you're watching this, but we'll see if we can have something for you there. Thank you very much. And where's my magic music where we wave, smile, and say goodbye? Thanks again, Sascha. Bye, everybody.